Hello, hello. Hope all is well, y'all. My face is shiny, but oh well. We're gonna roll with it today. We are going to roll with it today. Um, Tonight, we are talking about unhealthy isolation. So I'm excited to talk through it a bit. It's actually not a topic that I hear people talk about often, but I think it's something that we actually deal with often. And sometimes we may mistake our isolation for a good thing, but sometimes we take it overboard. I think with COVID, a lot of us have probably gotten used to being by ourselves. And because of that, our connections and our relationships kind of got put by the wayside. So I hope this conversation just brings us some more awareness and gets us thinking about if we're isolating ourselves. Hey Kiki, how are you? Um, so I hope this is helpful. I have what we got tonight. I have 6 affirmations for tonight, all surrounding unhealthy isolation, but more so just surrounding connections and just fostering good, productive, successful relationships. And this doesn't have to be intimate relationships, or this could be platonic relationships, it could be friendships, this could be just within our own family. So hi Hiru, how are you? So this is across the board, so don't try to pigeonhole yourself into one type of relationship. This is for all types of relationships and fostering those connections. So as always, you can use your affirmations however you wish to. Feel free to use them, whether it be writing them down in your journal, writing them down on your Post-it notes, posting them on your wall, recording yourself saying them. However you want to do that, feel free to use them. However, if you need to change the language, you can do that also. And let me dive in. Let's see here. And some of these are very simple, but I think a lot of these are going to just get us thinking about it, right? Because even like as I was writing them out, I really started thinking about the relationships that I have and the connections I have. So number 1 is I attract connections that bring joy and support. I attract connections that bring joy and support. I'll say that again. I attract connections that bring joy and support. So it's about not just attracting those connections, but becoming more aware of the connections that we are attracting. Because if you become more aware of the connections and the relationships that you have attracted in the past or are attracting now, and you find that those connections are not good for you, then it's something that you may have to explore within yourself, is like, what am I doing? Not to say that you're doing anything wrong, but what are you doing to attract these types of connections? Are you entertaining the wrong conversations? Are you entertaining the wrong people? Are you stuck in a space that, as far as like your connections are in one space, but yourself mentally and emotionally are in a different space? So thinking about all of those different things and understanding what connections you're attracting and whether they bring you joy and support, and actually really taking the time to explore yourself as far as what am I attracting, what am I giving off, what am I bringing to myself. Am I doing a lot of complaining? Am I doing a lot of negative talk? Am I trauma bonding with people? And that's why these connections are coming, but then they end up, fostering in other ways to where it's like, okay, this person is not actually right for me. They're actually pretty toxic. Okay. So just really taking the time to think about if you are isolating and if you are isolating yourself often, really thinking about why and understanding what types of people or what types of connections you're attracting, and are those connections right for you. So really thinking through those things, right? So that was number one. I attract connections that bring joy and support. Really think about what these connections that you're attracting, what they're bringing. What are they bringing with them? Because everybody's bringing something. And if it's not something that's positive or productive or supportive, then what are they bringing, right? Think about that. Number two, I attract relationships that complement my future, not my past. Hi, Helen. Welcome in. I attract relationships that complement my future, not my past. I will say that again. I attract relationships that complement my future, not my past. Sometimes we self-isolate because we are surrounded by people who remind us of who we used to be. And that's why we don't want to be around those people, and that's why we isolate, right? Hi, Chris. Welcome in. So understanding um, the types of relationships that we have in our lives, and if these relationships are supposed to be in our lives at the time that we're thinking about those things, right? There are a lot of times where I have relationships with people, and then for some reason they kind of falter off. Not for any reason, not for anything bad. It's just that the relationship changes because you're changing, you're evolving, you're growing. And honestly, if you have the relationships in your lives and nobody's changing and nobody's like getting better, nobody's evolving, there's no growth, then is that relationship the right relationship I should be fostering? Again, we're not talking about romantic relationships only. We're also talking about friendships. We're also talking about our family dynamic. We're also talking about even just like people that we associate ourselves with from time to time, friends that you may see every 7 to 8 months or whatever. So like really just kind of thinking about, again, the relationships that we're attracting, but does this person complement my future? Does this person complement my purpose? Does this person complement where I want to see myself, or what I want to go, where I want to go? I always had a mentor. I had a mentor that always told me that always surround yourself with people who are where you want to be, because of the fact that if you're the top dog in all of your circles, then where can you go? Where can you grow from? What can you grow from? And when it comes to those relationships, how are they benefiting you? Now, granted, it's not all about you and you having a benefit from every little interaction, but if you're trying to sustain a relationship with someone, there has to be a sense of give and take, right? So if there's a sense of give and take, and it's all give, 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 or take, 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 is that a relationship that I should be fostering? So think about becoming more aware of the relationships that you have, and are those relationships going to help you grow? Are those relationships going to help you be a better version of yourself? Are those relationships tied to your purpose or your goals, or not even just like career goals, right? Just goals in life. Do they complement all of these things? So just thinking about that, not everybody has to, but really kind of think about your circle, who you're surrounding yourself with. And if you are if you're isolating or find yourself isolating yourself a lot, think about the reasons why. That could be a reason why you're surrounded by people that are not helping you in furthering where you want to go or take yourself to the next step. So that was number 2, right? Yes, that's number 2. Number 3, I let go of relationships that consistently drain my energy. I let go of relationships that consistently drain my energy. I will say that again. I let go of relationships that consistently drain my energy. Again, sometimes we do not want to, we end up self isolating because we are connected to the wrong people, just connected to the wrong people. And because we won't let those people go, we surround ourselves with that energy and with that dead weight. And a lot of times people just kind of, hang on to our coattails for whatever reason, whether it be it's something that they want from us or something that they need from us, or they just like the idea of us. So they just kind of hold on for dear life sometimes to try to make sure that they stay in your life, but they are draining you and they're exhausting you, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And then we end up self-isolating because of the fact that our energy is constantly being drained. And then we wonder why we're consistently burnt out. We wonder why we keep falling into the cycles of depression. We wonder why we're heavily anxious and stressed. And a lot of times it's because we're holding on to relationships that are just draining us dry to the point where we don't want to be around people. We don't want to connect with people because of how much energy is being drained out of us from whether it be this one relationship or even this one environment with a group of people. So taking the time, again, this is all about awareness, y'all. I'm not saying for y'all to like just stop stop all of the interactions that you have, but this is more so of being aware of how the relationships that are in your lives are affecting you, and making adjustments as needed, so that way it leaves room for you to make connections to the right people. um Hi, how are you? Is it Latrina? I think I said your name right. Welcome in. Thank you so much for coming in. Um, and oh, here we are. How are you? I haven't seen you in a little bit. Welcome back. So yeah, that was number 3. I let go of relationships that consistently drain my energy. Number 4, I approach every interaction with kindness, empathy, and authenticity. I approach every interaction with kindness, empathy, and authenticity. And I'll say that one more time. I approach every interaction with kindness, empathy, and authenticity. So I'm going to say this. It's going to probably be a little harsh, y'all, but I'm going to say this. Sometimes we attract the wrong people because we meet people initially with a facade. We meet people initially with the mask on or the best version of ourselves. And then when we start to get comfortable and then we start to actually be our authentic selves, that authentic self isn't a match for that person, or vice versa, right? So then we end up in these relationships with people. Again, we're not talking, friendships, all of that. We end up with these relationships and encounters with people because we're not presenting ourselves authentically. So if we start out in our authentic self, with empathy, with kindness, with openness, if we start out with that, and this is how we're interacting with people, and this is how we're approaching people, then it makes room for more genuine connections. And a lot of times we're not having those genuine connections because we're presenting ourselves to be what we think people want us to be. We're presenting ourselves to be what we want to be, or it may be, sometimes we have like the facade that we put on when we meet people, to the point where it's like, okay, I have to be this because I'm in this group of people and I'm in this space or this environment, but this isn't really who I am. You know what I mean? So taking the step back to think about, when I'm presenting myself, when I'm going into spaces and when I'm going into these rooms, am I going in these rooms as my authentic self? Am I going into this room with empathy and with openness? And am I vulnerable? Am I just thinking about all of those things? And also thinking about how you're presenting. When I'm presenting myself, am I presenting me authentically? Or am I presenting my representative? Am I presenting a, just a piece of me to where it maybe get convoluted down the line when it comes to when they get to know me a little bit more? So really think about that. Again, this is all about awareness. Not saying everybody's inauthentic and not genuine when you're meeting people. I'm not saying that. Just really think through how you're presenting and what that looks like when you're meeting people. And if it's a difference in who you are authentically, really think about ways that you can pull yourself out of that, or really thinking through why that is, why you feel like you have to present yourself a certain way. Now, I know that we have our professional selves and then we have our, our personal selves. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more so of, and there shouldn't be too much of a difference, because like, y'all, I'm like this at work. Like, honestly, people just be like, okay, that's just Debbie, that's just who she is. Like, I'm this way wherever I go. There's professional me and then there's like the at home me, but there isn't that much of a difference. When you meet me at work, you're probably going to get the same person. It's just a little bit more relaxed. So just really think about how you present yourself when you meet new people, and really see if there's a difference. And if there is, understanding why there's a difference. And once you understand why, maybe that will give you a little bit more insight on how to change that. So I hope that's helpful. And Shiffonia, I hope I said that right. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. That was number 4. Number 5, we have 2 more, y'all. So number 5 is, I trust in the power of vulnerability to deepen my connections with others. I trust in the power of vulnerability to deepen my connections with others. I trust in the power of vulnerability to deepen my connections with others. So awesome. So, yep. Oh, thank you guys for subscribing. I can't talk today. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate you. So yes, when it comes to trusting in the power of vulnerability, now, I know this is tough, y'all, but when it comes to connections, being vulnerable is a part of that, right? So now, when it comes to being vulnerable, you can talk about or think about your boundaries with that, right? You can think about timing with that. You can also think through if there's spaces that you need to set a boundary when it comes to that, or if you need more space to work through that, whether it be through therapy or just within your healing process. Yes, that's perfectly okay. But understanding, in order to have connections with individuals, in order to build relationships, and in order to build relationships that are sustainable and that are meaningful, there is some sense of vulnerability that needs to be there. The level of vulnerability is important. By all means, the way that you're vulnerable with a friend or a family member may be different than the way that you're vulnerable with a coworker. 100% get that. But understanding that when it comes to fostering connections, some sense of vulnerability is going to be a part of that. And if that's a struggle for you, working through why that vulnerability is, whether it be from trauma, whether it be from, just past experiences, whether it be just, it's always been, right? I've always been the person that's never had a lot of friends, or I've never been the person that has a lot of, as females, you always hear, there are some women that, and I was this woman at one point, so I'm not saying this to say this about anybody else, but there are some women that I was like, I don't have a lot of female friends. Like, I usually hang out with the dudes. I really don't have a lot of female friends. I was that woman, so I'm not just saying that, but just thinking about When it comes to vulnerability, why that's hard, why that's difficult, what trauma you experienced, and understanding that just because something has always been this way, this particular way, doesn't mean that that's the way that it has to always be, right? I think sometimes when we find things that are familiar, we just automatically find comfort with that. But what if your trauma is what's the familiar, right? So if you have a traumatic experience and it created and moved you into this little bubble, that's a familiarity, right? That's something that you're familiar with, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy and it doesn't mean that it's good for you. So don't necessarily use just because something is familiar as a gauge for it to be the way that you would want to act. Okay, so this is familiar, so this is the way that I'm going to continue to be because it's familiar. That's the trick. Sometimes when we fall into that, oh, it's familiar or it's comfortable, then that's where we end up in that unhealthy space. But we have to understand that there is growth in uncertainty. There is growth in the unfamiliar. There is growth in the unknown and in going into spaces you've never been and talking to people you've never talked to. And of course, I know that there's social anxiety that kind of comes into play when it comes to isolation too. We have, lived in through a pandemic, and I think that's all changed us. Like I know for me, myself personally, I'm happy at home by myself. So you just become more familiar. But is that rooted in trauma of COVID, or is that a healthy thing, right? Here we are. This came at a perfect time because I was feeling bad today because I don't have space for people, but for myself and my partner. But it's like my grind mindset has been so deep in some connections don't feel beneficial as much as they used to be. The more I develop and shift into a new me. I love that. Yeah, like you're in a transitional phase. And it's not to say that isolation isn't okay at certain points and seasons of our lives. Like sometimes you do have to isolate, grow, and then move back into connection. Like I feel like that is definitely a thing. I think sometimes we get to a point where we isolate and we get in our little bubble and we get comfortable there. And then we're growing, but then at a certain point, we get stagnant because we have no connections. So just understanding that even in isolation, you can find those new connections. Just because we remove ourselves out of relationships or certain arenas doesn't necessarily mean that we can't find new arenas. So that means that this is something that I can find new ways to network and think about my interests and think about the type of person that I want to be. And from that will determine the spaces that I want to be in. And then when you go into those spaces, then you'll meet people that are on the same wavelength as you. And then you can foster new connections. And then I also leave room for connections to circle back around, right? Having an open mind that maybe they're just not the best person for you to be around in this moment doesn't mean that they won't be 2 or 3 years from now. Maybe they have to isolate too and do their growth. There's seasons, when it comes to these things. So I love that this was on time for you. The cozy cocoon of isolation. I love that. The cozy cocoon. Listen, I have kind of like I've been trying to pull myself out of like my isolation period. I did have like an isolation period for a period of time. I think that was more so for my own growth and working with my in therapy and stuff. In this past, like I would say like past two years or so, I've been really trying to focus on fostering new connections and new spaces to be in. So yeah, so it comes and goes. There may be some times where you just gotta self isolate. I get it, but a lot of times with isolation comes depression, and a lot of times comes stress and anxiety, and a lot of times you just really need to have someone that you can lean on to just kind of pull you out of it. And it's if you're in a space right now where you're so isolated that you don't have anyone that you can reach out to or touch base with, that's where it becomes unhealthy. And when I say have someone to reach out to for support, I'm talking about someone that you know for a fact that will give you the right advice, that will give you and provide you support, and that will help push you to the next state of life that you're looking to be in. And a lot of times you just can't do it all alone. You can't do it all by yourself, even though we want to. I've always been that person too, where I'll just do it by myself, I'll figure it out. And you just struggle when you could have just literally just asked somebody and they're like, oh yeah, you just got to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay. I could have known, if I'd known this a week ago, I would have been done. So just really think, this is more so, again, I want to just reiterate, this is more so of awareness. This is just for you to bring to the top of how you're fostering your connections, what connections are in your life that are bringing you positivity and support, and what connections that are in your life that just are not for you anymore. Yes, there definitely has to be a balance. Agree, we need community to achieve the goal, the greater goal. Absolutely. We also just gotta navigate and discern from what we've learned in isolation and take it outside to others too. Yeah, like there's definitely a balance, and there is definitely time for you to spend time with yourself, spend time with God. There is like all of that, right? But and this is something actually my pastor like talked about a couple of weeks ago, is that there is blessings in community. There's blessings in connections and other people. And sometimes we'll pray for blessings, we'll pray for something to come in our lives, but we reject people. And we are rejecting, a lot of times, our blessings. A lot of times things come into our lives through people, through connections, through people that we know. I feel like every job I've gotten in the past has always been because I knew somebody, and they recommended me, or, people speak about you in rooms that you're not in, So fostering connections are important. And even though it's hard sometimes because we don't want to get hurt, or we, experience a loss, or even if we're grieving and we just don't want to connect to people because of the grief that we experience, there's so many different reasons as to why we self-isolate. But really taking the time to be aware of our surroundings and being aware of our connections and seeing how we can make this a better, even just us talking and speaking and community here just is, even if it's just small like that, just figuring out ways to have a sense of community. Because if you feel like you're a part of something, if you feel like you're a part of, even if it's just a conversation, that will give you a sense of hope. Somebody may say something that we're like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. Or, someone may say a word that you may just write down, and then now all of a sudden you have all of these ideas from that one word that someone said. But you wouldn't have been able to have that experience without making the connection. So really thinking about and being more aware of community and how you're connecting with people. Last one. I make an effort to foster new connections that aid in furthering my purpose. I make an effort to foster new connections that aid in furthering my purpose. I'll say that one last time. I make an effort to foster new connections that aid in furthering my purpose. It's all about purpose, right? It's all about figuring out why I'm here and what this life is, what I'm supposed to do with this life, right? And once you come to a conclusion, and that finding purpose is definitely a whole other life, right? But really thinking about, if this is my purpose, if these are my goals, this is where I want to see myself, this is where I want to go, what type of connection should I make in order to help me get there? Not to say that that should only be your only thought process of making friends or building relationships, but it should definitely be a part of that thought process of, if I have a goal, even if you're thinking about a partner, or even if you're thinking about friendships, what spaces can I go into that are going to help me with meeting my goal, but also help me foster and network with people who are in that same space. If you're a female entrepreneur, or if you're in a particular career field, where do those people go? If you want to advance in that career, like, where are those people at? Do they network? Where do they go after work? Think about all of those things in order to help foster the relationships that you want. So I hope that this was helpful. I went through 6 affirmations. I'll go back to the top just in case anyone's missed, but I will save the live. Number 1 was, I attract connections that bring joy and support. Number 2, I attract relationships that complement my future, not my past. Number 3, I let go of relationships that consistently drain my energy. Ooh, that's a good one. Number 4, I approach every interaction with kindness, empathy, and authenticity. Number 5, I trust the power of vulnerability to deepen my connections with others. And 6, I make an effort to foster new connections that aid in furthering my purpose. So I hope that these were helpful. This live is every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So definitely check in. We talk about different topics every week, and I give affirmations. But I'm excited because we're going to do a theme for Mental Health Awareness Month. For anyone that doesn't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So with this channel, I want to try to make sure that I give as much information I can in regards to mental health. But one thing that I think that is a topic that we talk about often, but we don't talk about in depth, is our feelings and emotions. Understanding the different types of feelings and emotions, but then also how to have the language to articulate what we're feeling. I think the biggest part, or the biggest issues that we have when it comes to, and even when talking about relationships, when it talks about interactions, we have a tough time because a lot of us don't know how to articulate how we're feeling. We only know about 5 emotions. We know about angry, we sad, we depressed, and we don't think about the others, literally 80 plus emotions that we could actually articulate and explain how we're feeling. But because we only know a good 3, 4, 5, or we only talk about a couple of them, that it's hard for us. It gets convoluted to where we can't even articulate how we're feeling a lot of time. And then we have primary and secondary emotions. So we may only showcase the secondary emotion, but we really have the primary emotion. So for example, our primary emotion is probably embarrassment, right? Somebody embarrassed us and it says something, we embarrassed. But our secondary emotion is anger, right? So we're showing the anger, but really we're embarrassed and we're hurt by the embarrassment. So really thinking about and talking about feelings and emotions, and we're going to talk about that for the month of May. I hope that the affirmations that comes for that month is helpful. And yeah, so I got a paper to write, y'all. I did this tidbit, and for you guys who are new, I'm also a graduate student for counseling. So I'm going to, even though I am a meditation coach, I've been certified as a meditation coach for the past 3 years. But I am in my master's program to be a counselor. So I've been writing a lot of papers, okay? A lot of papers. But I did get an A on my first paper. So we're making progress. So I'm gonna go ahead and head out and get that stuff done. But I hope to see you all next Monday, talking about "In My Feelings" is what the series is called. And also make sure to check out my book that I don't have in front of me right now. Yeah, I don't. Called "Not Self Let Me Be Great," but the link is in the bio. It's a self doubt inspiration and workbook. Check it out. Otherwise, I will see you all next week, Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. You all have a great rest of your evening, and thank you. Bye bye.